I never thought betrayal could come from the people who shared my blood. 2 years ago, when I lost my job, my family shut me out, leaving me to crawl through the darkness alone. I told myself it was temporary, that family always comes back. I was wrong. One winter evening, they stood at my doorstep with suitcases in hand, their words slicing deeper than any knife. "You don't even have a family. We'll take the house." My heart froze. And in that silence, I realized this wasn't family anymore. This was war. I grew up believing that family meant sacrifice. That was the creed drilled into me from the moment I could walk. Family first, no matter the cost. And for years, I carried it like a badge of honor. When my parents called in the middle of the night, sobbing about unpaid bills or sudden illnesses, I never hesitated. I'd roll out of bed, open my laptop, and transfer money before even questioning whether the story was true. It didn't matter that I barely had enough to cover my own rent. Their peace of mind became my burden to bear. At first, it felt warm, like I was part of something greater than myself, like I was the dependable one, holding the threads together when everyone else was fraying. I thought my giving would weave me deeper into the fabric of our family, but slowly that warmth turned heavy. I began to notice how my generosity wasn't met with gratitude. It was expected, demanded, as if I owed them my very existence. When I once dared to say I couldn't afford another emergency loan. The silence on the other end of the phone was so sharp it pierced through my chest. Then came the cutting words, "If you loved us, you'd find a way." I did find a way. I picked up extra shifts, burned out my weekends, ignored my own health, all so they could live a little easier. They'd praise me at family gatherings, holding me up like a golden daughter. "Emily always comes through," they'd say, with smiling mouths and narrowed eyes, as if those smiles were painted on. I wanted to believe them. I wanted to believe that beneath the manipulation, there was love. But as time went on, the praise soured. I remember one Thanksgiving when my brother raised his glass and toasted to me. Yet minutes later, in the kitchen, I overheard him mutter to his wife, "She thinks she's a hero, but she's pathetic, always trying to buy our love." I froze, holding the pumpkin pie I'd baked, feeling my stomach drop to the floor. I laughed it off when I walked in, pretended I hadn't heard. That's what loyalty does to you. It makes you swallow insults with a smile, because the thought of losing your family feels worse than losing your pride. Looking back, the red flags were everywhere. The missed birthdays when I was suddenly forgotten after sending money the week before. The family group chat that buzzed with jokes and plans, except I wasn't in it. I found out one day by accident when my niece borrowed my phone and asked, "Why aren't you in the family group? Everyone talks there." My chest tightened, but I shrugged it off, telling her they probably forgot to add me. But the truth screamed inside. They didn't forget. They didn't want me there. Their words grew sharper with time. Compliments morphed into criticism. "You've gained weight. Maybe if you worked out, you'd finally find someone to marry." Or, "Your job isn't that impressive, you're just average." I kept nodding, smiling, telling myself it was just tough love. I didn't realize that what they called tough love was simply cruelty dressed in family clothing. Then came the silence. The year I lost my job, the phones stopped ringing. No midnight calls, no check-ins, no group dinners. I waited, thinking they were giving me space. Days turned into weeks. My birthday came and went with no message. When I finally broke down and called my mother, her voice was flat, almost cold. "You should have planned better. We can't always carry you." Carry me? The irony hit me like a slap. Hadn't I been carrying them all these years? That was when the warmth was gone, replaced by a hollow ache that burrowed deep into my chest. I realized then that love in their hands was a transaction, and when I could no longer pay, I was discarded like trash. But still, I clung to the belief that maybe I misunderstood. Maybe they needed time. Maybe I just wasn't enough. And if I worked harder, gave more, they'd welcome me back. That's what kept me from cutting ties completely. I was loyal, even when that loyalty was killing me. It was a late autumn night when the illusion finally cracked further. I sat at my desk, sorting through emails, when I saw it. A message from my bank flagged as suspicious. The subject line made my stomach lurch. Notice of address change request. My hands trembled as I clicked it open. The email claimed someone had attempted to update the home address linked to my account, requesting that all statements be redirected. The request hadn't gone through, but the attempt was real. My heart pounded in my ears. Who would want to change my bank address? And then, like a shadow creeping across the room, the thought landed. Only someone close to me would know enough to try. I stared at the screen, my pulse racing, a chill crawling up my spine. Something was happening behind the curtain of smiles and silence, and for the first time, I wondered if my sacrifices had not only been taken for granted, but weaponized against me. My 36th birthday was supposed to be uneventful. I didn't plan a party, didn't invite anyone. I'd grown used to quiet celebrations, a cupcake with a candle I'd light for myself, and maybe a glass of wine. That evening, I was scrolling on my phone when a notification popped up. A message forwarded by mistake from my cousin. It contained screenshots of the family group chat, the one I had always been excluded from. My chest tightened as I opened the thread. There were my parents, my brother, my sister-in-law, even relatives I hadn't spoken to in years. And among the names was one that froze my blood, my ex-husband. His words bled across the screen. "Once we settle the paperwork, the house is ours. She won't fight back." I stared, unable to breathe. They weren't just talking about me behind my back. They were planning to take everything I had left. My own home, the one safe space I thought couldn't be touched, was their next conquest. It wasn't just betrayal. It was an ambush. The conversation unfolded like knives slicing my skin. My brother joked, "We'll make her sign. She's too soft to resist." My mother added, "If not, we'll just forge it. She won't even know until it's done." Laughter emojis followed, casual, cruel. My ex-husband chimed in. "She never checks the legal stuff. I'll handle the details." My vision blurred. The room tilted. I dropped the phone, clutching my stomach as if I'd been punched. The sound of my own heartbeat thundered in my ears. I couldn't cry at first. I couldn't scream. I just sat there in silence, the stillness heavier than any sob. It was as if my body knew that breaking apart would make me vulnerable again, and I couldn't afford that, not anymore. When the tears finally came, they came in waves, unstoppable, soaking the pillow until it clung to my face. Every memory I'd carried, holidays, birthdays, family dinners, curdled into poison. They had used my loyalty as a weapon, and now they wanted to erase me entirely. I cried not just for the betrayal, but for the death of the illusion I'd clung to all my life. That somewhere, beneath the cruelty, my family still loved me? Hours passed. The candle on my cupcake melted into nothing. I sat in the dark, knees pulled to my chest, rocking as if movement alone could soothe the raw edges of my soul. For the first time, I whispered to the empty room, "They are not my family." The words felt foreign, like trying on someone else's coat, but they carried a strange, dangerous power. Then something shifted. The sobs quieted. My body stilled. I reached for my phone again, wiping my swollen eyes. If they thought I was too soft, too blind, they were wrong. I opened the voice recorder app, thumb hovering over the red button. My hand trembled, but I pressed it. The screen glowed back at me, recording the silence of the room. I whispered, "From now on, everything is evidence." It was a small act, almost laughable against the scale of what they had planned. But in that moment, it was a declaration. I was no longer just a victim. I would become a strategist. Every call, every message, every suspicious movement, they would all be logged. They thought I was weak because I cried. They didn't know tears could turn into armor. The first opportunity came quicker than I expected. The next day, my phone buzzed with an unknown number. A text appeared. "They're plotting more than you think. Check the mailbox tomorrow. Don't tell anyone you heard from me." My breath caught. Someone was feeding me information. Someone inside their circle. I stared at the message, heart racing. Who could it be? My aunt, who always stayed quiet in family fights? A cousin who once apologized for how they treated me? Or was it a trap, another layer of their manipulation to break me down further? I didn't know, but the thought that I had an ally, hidden, secret, ignited a flicker of hope. That night, lying in bed, I clutched the phone like a lifeline. My tears had dried, leaving behind only determination. The pain hadn't vanished, but it had transformed. Betrayal had cracked me open, and in the hollow space where trust used to be, something harder, sharper was taking root. I whispered into the dark, "This isn't over." And for the first time in years, I believed myself. I didn't sleep after that text. My mind was a storm of suspicion, but by morning I knew what I had to do. I couldn't fight shadows with tears. I needed proof, undeniable and sharp as glass. So I reached out to a digital forensics specialist, a man named Carter who had once helped a friend recover files after a messy divorce. When I explained my situation, his voice tightened. "If they're as sloppy as you say, we'll find something." I handed him my laptop and phone, my entire digital life trembling in his hands. For days, I lived in restless limbo, pacing the floor, waiting for the call. When it finally came, his tone carried both victory and unease. "Emily, you need to see this." On his screen, folders bloomed open one by one. Emails, deleted messages, fragments of videos I never knew existed. Then he played the first clip. My parents sat in a dimly lit living room, clothes torn for effect, voices quivering as they rehearsed lines. "Our daughter abandoned us. We have nothing. Please, help." After the scene, the camera kept rolling. My father laughed, wiping fake tears with a smirk. My mother adjusted her sweater and muttered, "Do you think this will get enough donations?" The bile rose in my throat. Carter explained that the video had been uploaded to a hidden server connected to the GoFundMe page set up in my name. My family had used me as a prop in their theater of lies, siphoning money from strangers who believed they were helping me. For a moment, relief surged. I had evidence. But as we clicked through more files, the relief thinned. Many of the videos were fragments, corrupted or incomplete. And then we reached the last file. Its name was just numbers and letters, locked under encryption. Carter frowned. This one's protected. Whatever's in here they didn't want anyone to see. He promised to work on it, but the uncertainty hollowed my stomach. I had enough to expose them, but not enough to destroy them completely. Walking home, the air felt heavier. I clutched the flash drive like a weapon, though the weight of missing pieces gnawed at me. It was the first time in weeks I felt momentum, yet the unfinished puzzle made me uneasy. The cliff loomed, but I couldn't see the bottom. That night, a knock rattled my door. My Aunt Marjorie stood there, her eyes darting like a thief. She had always sided with my parents, always turned away when their cruelty cut me deepest. Yet now she slipped a manila envelope into my hands. "Don't ask how I got these," she whispered, "but you'll need them." Inside were photocopies of forged documents, draft deeds with my signature crudely replicated, plans to sell my house to a family trust. My throat tightened. Proof of their scheme, handed over by the last person I expected. Days later, another surprise arrived. Mr. Harlan, my grumpy neighbor, who once called me the noisy tenant, rang my doorbell. He carried a small recorder. "I heard things," he said bluntly. "I don't like getting involved, but I don't like liars either." He played the audio. My brother and sister-in-law arguing on their porch, voices sharp in the night. "We'll take everything from her," my sister-in-law hissed. "She's too stupid to stop us." His words were clear, damning. I stared at him, stunned, as he added, "Use it if you have to." For the first time, I felt the universe pushing back against their cruelty. But just as hope steadied me, it cracked. One evening, I met with Hannah, my closest friend, the one person I trusted to keep my secrets. I had confided in her about the GoFundMe scam, about Carter, about the encrypted file. Her face softened, her voice soothing, telling me I wasn't alone. Yet later that night, as I sorted through my phone logs, a strange pattern appeared. Calls to my brother's number, right after every time I'd spoken to her. My pulse spiked. I scrolled further, realizing the overlap was too precise to be coincidence. Hannah had been feeding them my every move. My confidant, my anchor, was a double agent. The realization cut deeper than anything else. Betrayal from family was one thing. Betrayal from a chosen friend, someone I had let into my rawest pain, was another kind of wound altogether. I sat frozen, phone in hand, the walls pressing in on me. I wanted to scream, to smash the device, to erase her from my life, but instead I whispered into the dark, "You too?" The night ended with a quiet resolve. Betrayal, evidence, allies both real and false. It was all a chessboard now. And if Hannah thought she could break me by playing both sides, she was wrong. I opened my notebook and wrote a single line: "Trust no one. Record everything." As I set the pen down, my phone buzzed again. A new message appeared from the unknown number. "They're moving faster than you think. Be ready." My hand tightened. Whoever this shadow ally was, they knew more than they should. But could I trust them? The question dangled in the air, unanswered, as the night closed in around me. The snow fell heavy that December, blanketing the streets in silence. My family had gathered at my parents' house for Christmas, the one holiday they still paraded as a symbol of unity. I had not been invited, but I arrived anyway, clutching a flash drive like a dagger in my pocket. My pulse hammered as I walked up the steps, the glow of the lights mocking me with their warmth. Inside, laughter rang out, hollow and sharp. When I entered, the room froze. Dozens of eyes turned to me, relatives, neighbors, even distant cousins who had once pretended I didn't exist. My brother sneered, his voice dripping with disdain. "You don't belong here, Emily. Leave before you embarrass yourself." I didn't answer. Instead, I walked to the television in the living room, plugged in the drive, and pressed play. The screen lit up with the video Carter had recovered, the staged sob story for GoFundMe. My parents sat in ragged clothes, pleading for help, their voices trembling with false despair. Then the raw footage rolled on. The laughter afterward, my father's smirk, my mother fixing her sweater, asking if the act was convincing enough. Gasps filled the room, murmurs rippled like a wave. A cousin covered her mouth. My aunt shook her head in disbelief. For a brief shining moment, I felt the tide turn in my favor. Then Hannah stood up. My friend, my betrayer. Her voice cut through the chaos like a knife. "This is fake," she shouted. "Emily edited this to make her parents look bad. She's been spiraling for years. You can't trust her." The room shifted again, the sympathy evaporating as suspicion clouded the air. My brother nodded, seizing the moment. "See, she's delusional. She'll destroy anyone just to feel important." Their voices pressed down on me, smothering, isolating. I felt the floor tilt beneath my feet. For a heartbeat, I thought I'd lost everything. But then, I steadied myself. Slowly, I pulled out another drive, one Carter had delivered only days earlier, the decrypted file. My hands trembled, but I forced the plug into the port. The screen flickered, then opened to a new recording. This time, there was no staging, no pretense. Just my parents in their living room, champagne glasses in hand, counting stacks of cash. My father laughed so loud, it echoed in the silence of the room. "Can you believe people actually donated? They're dumber than Emily." My mother clinked her glass to his. "She'll never see a cent of it." The silence that followed was suffocating. Even Hannah, caught mid-breath, faltered. She opened her mouth, but no words came. Then, unexpectedly, a sound cut through the stillness. A slow, deliberate clap. I turned, heart pounding, to see my neighbor, Mr. Harlan, standing in the doorway. His eyes swept the room as he said, "I heard it myself, every word." He held up the recorder he had given me, his evidence undeniable. Gasps turned into outrage. Cousins shouted. Aunts whispered. The foundation of my family's lies crumbled before their eyes. And for once, I wasn't the target. I was the revealer. But the night had one more card to play. My brother's wife, pale and trembling, rushed from the room. Phones buzzed as whispers spread, and within minutes, another screen lit up. Someone had uploaded photos to social media. My ex-husband, locked in an embrace, with my sister-in-law at a hotel. The revelation swept through the gathering like fire. My brother's face twisted with rage. My ex tried to stammer excuses, but the images spoke louder than words. The room, once my prison, had become their courtroom. I stood quietly, my heart no longer racing, but steady. The pain was still there, the betrayal etched into my skin. But for the first time, the power was mine. I didn't have to scream. I didn't have to beg. The truth did all the work. By the end of the night, the family that had united against me was splintered into pieces. Some turned away from my parents in disgust. Others whispered apologies under their breath, unable to meet my eyes. And me, I walked out into the snow, the cold biting but cleansing. Behind me, the sound of chaos spilled from the house, but I didn't look back. My war wasn't finished, but this battle was mine. The fallout from Christmas was immediate. Within days, the GoFundMe account my parents had created was frozen, its funds locked by investigators. News of the fraud spread quickly once neighbors began sharing the clips I had revealed. Headlines appeared online. Family scam exposed. Daughter's evidence unravels elaborate fraud. Strangers who had once donated out of pity demanded answers, their angry comments flooding every corner of social media. The family that had once hidden behind carefully crafted stories could no longer escape the glare of truth. My brother was the first to crumble. His company placed him on suspension after learning his name was tied to the fraudulent fundraiser. By the end of the week, he was fired, escorted from the office, where he had once bragged about his stability. My sister-in-law, her affair with my ex-husband now public, faced her own collapse. Her employer terminated her contract after citing breach of professional integrity. In the end, they thought they could destroy me, but they ended up dismantling themselves. Yet the satisfaction wasn't clean. Each piece of news brought relief, yes, but also a dull ache. These were the people who had raised me, who had held my hand when I was small, who once tucked me into bed. Seeing them unravel didn't erase the pain of what they had done. It didn't bring back the years I had wasted trying to earn love that was never real. Justice had a bitter taste, and in the quiet of my apartment, I still cried. The investigators reached out, asking me to cooperate fully. They wanted every file, every recording, every screenshot. I handed it all over, the evidence now a weapon, not just for me, but for the law. Carter, the digital forensics specialist, testified about the encrypted files. Mr. Harlan offered his recordings. Even my Aunt Marjorie admitted under oath that she had seen drafts of the forged deeds. The walls of lies my family built were stripped away, one testimony at a time. And yet, the story didn't end with me. One evening, while scrolling through my messages, I received a note from a woman I had never met. Her words were raw, trembling through the screen. "I saw your story online. They did the same thing to me years ago. I gave them money when they claimed your father was dying. I drained my savings because I thought I was helping. I've lived with the shame ever since." The revelation floored me. My family hadn't just targeted me. They had preyed on others, weaving their lies far wider than I had imagined. This woman wasn't alone. As the weeks passed, more messages arrived. Old neighbors, distant acquaintances, even church members came forward. They had all been manipulated, each one carrying scars of betrayal, each one ashamed for having believed. In that moment, my battle expanded. This was no longer just about reclaiming my own life. It was about exposing a pattern of abuse that had stretched across years, leaving countless victims in its wake. For the first time, I didn't feel alone. The drama that had once isolated me was now shared, larger than me, bigger than my pain. The courtroom hearings began in spring. My parents sat at the defense table, their faces hardened into masks. They avoided my eyes, but the weight of evidence pressed down on them like a storm. Witness after witness recounted the same story. Lies told in whispers, pleas for money, promises that never materialized. The judge listened in silence, and when the gavel fell, my parents were charged with fraud, my brother with conspiracy. The house I lived in, the home they tried to steal. was legally confirmed as mine, safe at last. And still, when I walked out of that courthouse, the cheers from strangers ringing in my ears, I felt the quiet sting of loss. I had won, but I had also buried what little remained of family ties. Justice doesn't stitch up the holes, it simply stops the bleeding. I stood on the courthouse steps, watching the crowd disperse, wondering if the ache in my chest would ever leave. That night, as I returned home, I found a plain envelope tucked beneath my door. No return address, only my name written in neat, unfamiliar handwriting. I tore it open, my pulse quickening. Inside was a single sheet of paper, the words stark against the white. They were never your only family. I am your real sister. We need to talk. The page slipped from my hands, landing softly on the floor. My mind raced, questions spiraling faster than I could catch them. Was this another trick, another layer of manipulation? Or had the past been hiding secrets I couldn't even begin to imagine? The silence of the room seemed to lean in, pressing close, waiting for my reaction. And in that moment, I realized my story was far from over. The first thing I did after the trial was simple, yet terrifying. I cut the cord. I changed my phone number, blocked every contact tied to my family, and deleted the threads I had clung to for years. No more maybe one day texts, no more hoping for apologies that would never come. The silence that followed was deafening at first, like standing in a room, stripped bare of furniture. But with time, that silence became peace. I began therapy soon after. My therapist, a soft-spoken woman named Clara, taught me the hardest word I had ever struggled to say. No. No to guilt. No to obligations rooted in manipulation. No to giving when it drained me empty. At first, the word felt jagged on my tongue, but week by week, it grew easier. Saying no wasn't cruelty, it was survival. Each session chipped away at the armor I had built around myself. For so long, I had been stuck in chaos, always preparing for the next attack, always bracing for betrayal. But slowly, the storm inside quieted. I began to sleep through the night without jolting awake to phantom phone calls. I started cooking meals for myself again, savoring the taste of food, not rushed between battles. Even laughter, once a foreign sound, crept back into my life. In that stillness, I found clarity. My life didn't have to revolve around their poison anymore. Healing wasn't about erasing what happened. It was about reclaiming the pieces of myself they had stolen. I walked in the park, feeling the sun without the weight of dread pressing on my shoulders. I lit candles in the evening, not to mark loneliness, but to celebrate my own survival. But peace didn't mean passivity. I realized my story had power, the kind that could reach others still trapped in the grip of toxic families. When a local community group invited me to speak, I hesitated. The thought of standing before strangers, peeling back my scars, terrified me. Yet something inside whispered, "Do it." So I did. I told my story, my voice trembling but steady enough to carry. I saw faces in the crowd soften, eyes shining with recognition. Afterward, people came up to me, whispering their own experiences. Siblings who drained their savings, parents who controlled them with guilt, partners who enabled the abuse. "I thought I was alone," one woman said, her hand gripping mine. For the first time, I understood that my pain could be more than a wound. It could be a bridge. The invitations grew. Soon, I was speaking at conferences, writing articles, appearing on podcasts. My name became linked not to scandal, but to survival. Each time I stood on a stage, I carried not just my voice, but the voices of those who had been silenced. I wasn't just rebuilding my life, I was rewriting it. And yet, the letter lingered. It sat in the top drawer of my desk, the handwriting still sharp in my memory. I am your real sister. We need to talk. At first, I ignored it, convincing myself it was another trap. But late at night, when the world grew quiet, the possibility gnawed at me. Could it be true? Could there be someone out there, someone bound to me, not by cruelty, but by blood I had never known? The thought was dangerous, but it also carried hope. If another sister existed, hidden from me all this time, what secrets had been buried? What lies had shaped the life I thought was mine? I didn't have the answers, not yet, but I knew this: the story wasn't finished. My life had already been torn down and rebuilt once. If another chapter waited in the shadows, I was ready to face it, not with fear, but with the strength I had earned through every wound, every betrayal, every hard-won victory. For now I live free. I wake up in a home that is truly mine. I choose who belongs in my circle and who does not. I build not for them, but for myself. And as I stand before rooms filled with strangers who now feel like kin, I remind them and myself of a truth I once thought I'd never believe. Family isn't always the people you're born to. Sometimes it's the people you find when you finally choose yourself. And with that, my new life begins, while somewhere out there, a letter waits, promising that another story is just about to unfold.